Hi and welcome to this information session on dynamic classrooms. My name is Berry Johnston. I'm a paediatric occupational therapist and I run and own Little Peeps Occupational Therapy for Kids. Currently, one of the main schools that I work with is the Fremantle Language Development Centre, and here we are striving to have a rollout of dynamic classroom approach from our Kindy to Year 3 classrooms. In this session today, we're going to go through some information about what is a dynamic classroom, some examples within schools, and then we'll have the opportunity to brainstorm what you can do in your class, what you might need, such as resources and equipment, and also what barriers and what makes it difficult to embedding a dynamic classroom approach. So what is a dynamic classroom? Basically, a dynamic classroom is something that's not static. The word dynamic implies movement and fluidity, something that can be changed easily, but also meets a number of needs for a number of different students. Technically, it's an open space that is flexible and fluid. You're presenting the students with different seating options, different worktop options, and having lots of variety of postures and movement for them to engage with. The different worktops could be paper, whiteboard, chalkboards, their smart TVs, their devices. But also they could have interactive opportunities so that they can work together on a joint project. So large whiteboards and large rolls of paper, or interactive devices such as smart TVs. There's also a key to this is having lots of different postures and movements. Dynamic postures refer to a body that is moving, so that something isn't in a static and fixed pose. So having a dynamic classroom enables dynamic postures, and that is basically a lot of variety of postures and movements throughout the day. Children might be allowed to sit, stand, lay, kneel, sit in a regular chair or an alternate chair to do their work. It really is about giving lots of variety to that body. This diagram here refers to the House of OT, which is an analogy for the development of a child and comparing that to the building and construction of a house. We know that when you build a house, you start with the foundation level, the sensory systems. The child then goes on and puts their blocks or their bricks and mortar together, which are all the school-based skills we often see in the classroom, so motor planning, balance, coordination, handwriting skills, eye movements. And finally, we then put on the roof of the house. So that child brings it all together and shows self-control, self-esteem, and ability to organise themselves. What we do know is that for some children, an issue up here might actually reflect some challenges down in their slab level of their house. Or difficulties here, such as fine motor planning, might also be a reflection of something going awry with their sensory system. A dynamic classroom is a perfect approach to ensure that all of these areas can be enhanced where the children is working to their full capacity, whether there's an issue going on down here, or in the building blocks, or in the roof level of the house. A dynamic classroom really gives some targeted opportunities to engage the sensory systems throughout the day because we are moving our bodies and giving feedback to them from the environment. And that in turn flows on to that child's ability to control their behaviours and self-control, but also their ability to switch on and concentrate. What are the benefits of having a dynamic classroom? The benefits are it improves self-regulation. We know that top level of the house of the child is all about self-regulation, controlling emotions, behaviours and attention. When we provide feedback to the body through incidental opportunities in the classroom with the dynamic classroom, it leads to better, improved self-regulation. From a physical perspective, it also actually improves dynamic blood flow. Dynamic blood flow refers to the fact that muscles are pumping more blood throughout the body rather than the blood pooling in the muscle bellies. When this blood is actively pumped throughout the body, it oxygenates the blood more efficiently, and then that oxygenated blood is received by the brain. So there's a direct correlation between moving the body and having improved concentration because of the oxygen levels. The other benefits are the fact that the child has ownership and control of their own individual learning style. Some children may choose to sit in a regular classroom chair and table to do their work, but for other children who have the wiggles and just need to move, they've got that opportunity to engage with different equipment to make the best of their learning opportunities in the classroom. So here's some pictures that really typically demonstrate what a dynamic classroom might be. It could be the use of wobble stools, standing stations, the child laying on the floor. Could be height adjustable tables like we see here, but even retreat spaces where the child can lounge on a couch, sit in a beanbag, and hide themselves away in a corner so they're not overwhelmed by sensory input. So why is it beneficial? Well, we know it's beneficial because it allows their personal learning preferences to be addressed. So if a child needs to move in order to listen, it allows them to do that. But if a child needs to sit and have quiet and focus, it also allows for that. From an educational perspective, dynamic classrooms can also allow for more collaborative work because workspaces can be rearranged easily to allow more group-based work. As I mentioned before, it allows for dynamic blood flow, which increases our attention and focus, and it is really helpful for those children that have self-regulation difficulties. It also helps address the physical activity guidelines, which is for 60 minutes a day, children should have 60 minutes of physical activity. And we can help achieve this because it allows for incidental movement within the classroom. So what is the evidence? Well, the evidence is that a lot of schools are actually moving towards this as it connects strongly with ergonomic evidence within the workplaces. For a lot of people in office-based jobs, they are starting to introduce more sit-to-stand workstations, movement breaks throughout the day. And the reason why this is occurring is because of the evidence that shows that it increases work productivity. So not only does it improve worker satisfaction and performance and mental health and well-being, but it actually improves productivity. We can also connect this to educational research on collaborative classrooms and 21st century learning, where children are dynamically engaged with technologies around them and in their classroom. A lot of schools will go out and fund these classrooms so that they are engaging, with one-to-one devices, but shared devices such as a smart TV, and it might cost a lot to set this classroom up. But the basic aspects of it is about the movement of the child. So these schools might spend $10,000 to $12,000 per classroom, but those same physical basis of a dynamic classroom can still be addressed through a very limited budget. Leon Straker is a lecturer at Curtin University, and he refers to sitting as a new epidemic. And what's so common over the last probably 20 years or more is you'll walk into a mainstream classroom and you'll see children with a static desk and a static chair, and that is their chair. You might get children being moved around from one term to the next, but children are expected to sit in that desk and that chair to complete their work. When we're encouraging children to sit more and sit still for longer, it doesn't facilitate dynamic blood flow through their body, but it also is creating sedentary behaviours. And we know that sedentary behaviours are very detrimental to mental health and physical health and well-being as well. So it's really important that in all environments we encourage dynamic movement and avoid the sedentary behaviours that can lead to lifelong health consequences. I'd really encourage you to go onto YouTube and search for Edutopia and look at this clip, which is on flexible classrooms in the US. And they've got some really great creative ideas that were low cost that might be suitable for your classroom. And it just really puts into perspective into a good visual representation of what a dynamic classroom can look like and how it can work. So some examples in the classrooms of what teachers have done include purchasing of wobble stools. There's two brands, there's the Hoki stool or the Eclipse wobble stool, and they are both available from wholesalers of school-based furniture sales. And these are basically little chairs that allow us to wobble. It's a bit like sitting on a fitball, but here you have a chair with a convex base on the bottom, so it has a real rotational effect. That's a simple strategy you can use in the classroom, but also creating standing workstations. And it doesn't have to be specific desks, but it might even be, say, the big white drawers you have in the classroom could then become a standing workstation. Or even having children work at a vertical surface so that you could put their work and stick it on the wall and they can write against the wall while they're doing their work. Laying on the floor is another great option, so you might need to invest in a class set of clipboards so they can lay on the work floor and do their work. Or even under the surface of a desk is a really good option. You could paint that in blackboard paint, and that becomes a really good dynamic way to engage in a classroom. A number of teachers I work with have gone and bought second-hand couches or gone to roadside collections to get second-hand couches for their classroom or little bean bags. And even some of this could be sourced by donations from families as well. So what teachers have done have gone through their classrooms and said, what is it about it that I can change easily? They might have purchased some equipment or asked their parent and citizens group for funding for certain equipment. But what they also need to do is look at the benefits it gives them in their classroom. So what are the benefits? Some teachers anecdotally report about the improved concentration and attention of these children, but also the fact that they can then sit longer when they're required. So the wibbling and the wobbling of the children and fidgeting on the mat time isn't so apparent anymore. Teachers are finding students are getting stronger, being more on task with their work, and having less challenges with behaviours in their classroom as well. But what would they change? Well, for some teachers, they prefer to have more consistent opportunities in the classroom, so having more access to equipment and more accessing to funding to fund the equipment in their classroom. So I want you to consider, what is it you think you would consider is a dynamic classroom? What is it that makes a classroom different from a static classroom you might see in mainstream classes? And what could you do to make it more dynamic? So if you already think you've got some dynamic features, how could we build on that to make it even more creative and dynamic for our students? But what do you need to make it more dynamic? Is it just furniture? Is it resources and time? Is it support from your administration? Is it even parent donations and help? Or does it just come down to money? So it might be a good idea to answer these questions as a team, with you in your professional cluster at your school, and think about, how could you set up one classroom in your school to make it slightly more dynamic? And maybe that will be the target you set by the end of the year, to have one dynamic classroom. Some schools even set up children and student teacher agreement forms and if you go onto Google, you can search for flexible classroom seating agreements, and it's like mini contracts that teachers have students sign that talk about that the child is going to work where they best feel they need to work. Some teachers might dictate children will, at the beginning of the year, will sit in certain spots and they will rotate so children can experience all the different features. Other teachers prefer a more fluid approach where children can choose where they sit and work. So in follow-up and some rollout of a dynamic classroom approach, consider what support do you need. If you're at the Fremantle Language Development Centre, that is something the OT program can support you with. But if you're in another mainstream school, maybe that's something you can seek the support of OTs to help design this program, and you might need to discuss this with your executive at your school. I'd like to thank you for your time in listening to this dynamic classroom approach. I'd encourage you to search for Edutopia Flexible Classrooms on YouTube, because it's got some really great examples. And if you do have any questions and you're from the Fremantle Language Development Centre, please feel free to contact me and we can work through them together. Thank you.